Welcome to Settling In with Programming workshop series. This workshop is the Beginner Python workshop. At the beginning of this workshop, we will try to identify if we have a working version of Python. So we will type python -- version. We will see that we have Python installed, and then we can move forward. If we don't have Python installed, then we have to first make sure that we install it. So now that we have Python installed, we will start using the interactive shell for Python. To do that, we type the command python, and now we can start. So this is what we usually use to test Python statements and to see if the syntax and the semantics are what we want our program to actually do. And once we're done with testing, then we can start generating our Python files. So we will be using it right now to introduce the different concepts that we have in Python. So one thing that we would like to do is to generate output. So the way to do that is we would use the keyword print. And then we can output different things. So in this statement, for example, we can output a string hello. Now we need to make sure that we have the double quotations in the beginning and at the end so that we don't generate a error. Because if we don't have these, it will assume that this is either a variable or a keyword, and if those two don't exist, it will say this is unidentified. So we need to have two quotations so that we can tell Python that this is just a string and please output this string. So this is the output result for this function. We can also output numbers, and numbers are not identified as variables, and so the Python will identify any given number as a number and will generate output using the print keyword. Now we can also identify variables and then print variables. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a variable. Now the word declare is important because it defines that I am assigning a value to a letter or a specific word that I use. So right now I decided that I want X to be the name of the variable, and also I defined that I wanted to use the number 23 and assign this value to this variable. So I will assign another variable and I will call it Y, and I will give it the number 12. So what I did so far is I declared a variable and gave it an initial value. I declared a variable and assigned to it an initial value. So right now what I can do is I can print the value of X. So when it sees a character like this without quotations, it will assume either it's a keyword or a variable. And so in this case, we already declared the variable and we already gave it a value. So Python knows it, so it won't generate an error. And it will output the value of X. Now, the next step, or the next thing that we're going to do, is we are going to try to do some operations on our variables. So we have two integers, and what we want to generate or print the output of the sum of these two integers. So we see here that we have an operator, the plus operator, which is basically a binary function that takes two arguments or two operands and gives back the sum. So here we have input and also we have a return value, the output, and then the return value of this function is used by this function and give output to the user. So what happens here is that x will be substituted with its value, y will be substituted with its value. The operator plus will take these two arguments, generate the sum, and then give us back a value, and then the function print will take that value and output that value to the user. So you can see here that the output value is the summation of the values of x and y. So now we have this operation, which is x plus y divided by 3. What happens here is that the computer needs to make a decision on which to do first. So the decision would be based on precedence. What takes precedence over another one? So the operators usually is that division takes precedence over the plus. So what will happen is that y will be divided by 3, and then the output of that will be added to x. So this will be the value. Now you will see that if I decide to do this in a different way, so this is different than this one because the computer usually gives precedence for brackets. So in this case, what will happen is that x will be added to y, and then the output of that will be divided by 3. And so you can see that the values are completely different. And another thing to notice here is that even though our integers are actually added to each other, the output was a float or a number with a decimal value. And that is because the division operator generates a float number, generates a number with a decimal point. And the addition operator, if any one of the operands is a float, it also generates a float. So you can see here that in this case, the addition would generate an integer value because it is integer plus integer. However, even after that, that will be divided by 3, and the division operator generates a number that is a float with a decimal point. And so in Python, there is a difference between a number that is an integer and a number that has a decimal point. And we will see ways later on how to cast from integer to float and from float to integer. So another thing that we can do is we can define a string. So right now I am assigning a variable a string, your mark is, and then I will assign an integer to the letter Z, and I will try to print the concatenation of these two, and we will see what will happen. So we will use, again, the print keyword, and we will use W plus Z. Obviously, what we have here are two variables with different types. So we have W, which is a type string, and we also have Z, which is a type integer. And so if I use the plus, how will Python handle the summation of a string with a integer? So what happens is that it says can only concatenate string to string, not integer. So one way to solve this is to cast the integer into a string. So what we will be doing is we will use the function str to change 85 from a number